Hi everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. Dungeons & Dragons just isn't for everyone, but sometimes people can take their disinterest to crazy levels, much like the subject of this next DnD horror story. To the post. Sudden Shock at RPG Night by Reddit user GC1RPG. Background: I was in a gaming club at college, and even after graduating, I still hung out there. We had regular themed nights, such as Magic the Gathering, a regular LARP, a movie night, anime night, etc. I started an RPG night in 2008, and I was its primary dungeon master, but eventually, it became a night for testing out one-shots, introductory one-shot games for new or possible members, etc. The incident happened sometime in 2010 or 2011, after I had graduated. While I started out as the primary dungeon master, it shifted from Dungeons & Dragons one-shots, or short modules, to a mixture of different tabletop RPGs, many being extremely simple, such as Fiasco. There could be as many as 4 to 5 different games running at once in the classroom. It sounds chaotic, but we actually made it work well most of the time. That year, the college had issued a requirement for freshmen to attend the meetings of at least 2 different clubs, and disallowed frat or sorority meetings for fulfilling that requirement. Our club's general meeting suddenly had 100 people in the room meant for 50, most of whom had no interest in our activities and just publicly mocked us during the actual meeting. We had gotten especially good at ignoring this kind of social bullying over the years. Well, if it was a requirement for the students, I would imagine that the ridicule from the fellow students that were just trying to fill a quota would have been some interest to the administration. Though, thankfully, things like Dungeons & Dragons have become less obscure in recent years, for better or for worse. Our general meeting and our other themed nights apparently counted as different meetings for the purposes of fulfilling that requirement, so some of these people attended our other nights, with almost every night having a packed house, when 10 to 15 was more the norm. RPG Night. Our RPG night rolled around, and we had enough possible players for 4 to 5 different tables, some of the tables having more than 6 players. I wasn't running a table that night, but was just flitting around, offering to help out different tables, with rules questions, helping out with character creation, etc., and making general chit-chat. While I don't like the stereotype, everybody there looked like they quote-unquote belonged there, as in no obvious frat bros, giggling sorority girls, or dudes who played pick-up rugby, etc. One of the tables was either running Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition or something similar. I can't quite recall. And there were several people there who obviously had zero experience with pen and paper tabletop RPGs. We told them it was like playing Oblivion, the popular Elder Scrolls game at the time, but that there was no computer to handle everything. I didn't see any strange reactions to that, odd looks, or any obvious signs of what was about to happen. The incident. I was helping somebody with quick character creation when suddenly one of the new people pushed his chair suddenly, jumped to his feet, and went berserk. He started screaming at the top of his lungs on how he couldn't do this anymore, that we were all sick or insane or something, and didn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. He went on for a few moments about how normal people don't play pretend and make up fantasy characters, that it was a sign that we all needed professional help, and then stormed out of the room. Everybody was obviously shocked, but we smoothed it out with the rest of the visibly stunned people in the packed classroom by making a few jokes about, "Oh, ignore that. That happens now and again." It worked, as we didn't have anybody else leave. At least, not immediately, and the night went on as planned. We did have 1 or 2 other people eventually leave, but they were very polite about it and simply said that it wasn't for them. We never saw the guy again at any of our meetings, although he had already been to the previous general meetings. I think Magic the Gathering night, and now RPG night. So prior to this incident, we thought he was on the fast track to becoming a new member. Nobody ever recalled seeing him on campus again, period. Although it was apparent that he was a freshman student from a specific dorm. Well, that certainly sounds strange. Maybe this dude just had some sort of psychotic break or something, or just couldn't see how people could roleplay as characters in a game for fun. Or he did it on some sort of dare, as they were in college, and in college, people do stupid things. Either way, at least it sounds like OP and the others running the game night were able to calm emotions afterwards. No pun intended. And everything went as planned. I mean, the worst thing to come from this whole thing is now some people have a story to tell. But let's move on to another D&D horror story about a player that had a bad case of main character syndrome, and she didn't get the result that she wanted. To the post. Dungeon Master, I'm an Archfey. By Reddit user Green Assumption 2163. For context, I was a player in a group that a close friend of mine was dungeon mastering for. I had typically been a DM for this friend group, so I was excited to be a player again. Dungeon Master tells us that we're allowed to homebrew some stuff, so I decided to attempt to make an Artificer subclass. I later switched to Gunslinger Fighter, as it was closer to what I was looking for. When we played, some people had some homebrew stuff like me, but none as egregious as another player, who we will call Maple. It's here that it's important that we bring that this was the Dungeon Master's first time DMing, aside from a practice session months before to see how the game would run. The Dungeon Master told us about 2 months before we started what the basis of the campaign was, and what the story was. However, Maple decided to give the DM an entire homebrew class and species after session 2. It was over 11 pages long. Although this was not during the actual game. Maple asked if they could have several level 20 to 30, something that isn't typically possible in 5th edition, characters as allies, as their character ran a tea shop. During session 1, we began doing some basic introductory stuff, and we were collecting our party members. Everyone ended up joining the party except Maple's character, who said out of character, "There's one specific thing that you need to say to me for me to join." We ended up having to threaten to move on without them for them to actually join the party after about 20 minutes. A few hours go by, and we all think the horror show is over. Not even close. We begin moving towards the main city, and along the way, Maple says that they can send the Fae army after people that they don't like, specifically at Jody and I. To this day, I don't know why. I brought it up with the Dungeon Master later, and it turns out this was a complete and entire lie. Their character was a general of the Fae realm who was disgraced. Were this an in-character threat, I think it would be a really cool moment of roleplay. But this was completely out of character, and an attempt to prove that they were the strongest member of the party. When we reached the main city, Maple immediately goes towards the forest outside the city, before a Fae that turns out to be their wife mysteriously appears. This was really confusing to all of us, except for Maple, and we later learned that they had texted the DM repeatedly after being told no many times, and even threatened to leave the game if she didn't, which would be bad because their backstory was so ingrained in the main plot. During this part of the game, Maple also texts the DM just saying, "By the way, I'm an Archfey," something that was never discussed with the DM beforehand. You may think this is where it ends, but no. After this, Maple became obsessed with a knife they had written into their backstory that would petrify people on a critical hit. Maple threatened to use the knife on Jody and I, and the DM told them that they didn't have it, and that it specifically said that they could not start with it. After this, Maple would go up to every single merchant and ask if they had their knife. This became the most annoying thing in the game while they were in this game. Eventually, they managed to badger the DM enough to go into the Feywild. We were level 3 when this happened. We ran into a character named the Oak Lord, an actual Archfey in the Summer Court of the Fey Realm. Maple then proudly proclaimed that they were smarter than him. The Dungeon Master corrected them, saying that they cannot be smarter than the Oak Lord, as he is an Archfey particularly known for intelligence and wisdom. This made Maple fly off the rails. They began shouting that their backstory can't be changed and it's against the rules. We eventually managed to calm them down to the point where they were not assaulting our eardrums anymore, but this remained as a regular topic they would bring up. Now, this is a side note. The real story ended there, as that was just about the last session they attended for unrelated conflicts with the Dungeon Master and one of the other players. Though Maple's character's class included the following: every spell on the spell list, including Divine Smite and Armor of Agathis. The ability to cast True Resurrection once every 10 days, requiring no components, including spell slots. Maple's species included the following as well: immunity to water damage, a running joke in our group now as water damage is not real. Spell slots tied to species, meaning that fighters could cast spells. Specifically, it was 3 9th level spell slots. A flying speed of 60 feet. Automatic familiar. This is not normally an issue, but the exact wording was, Fae can really have any pets that they want, and strong-armed the Dungeon Master into letting them have a crocodile-dog hybrid. Edit. Forgot to mention, but the game got almost infinitely better when they left. Well, it certainly seemed like this player had a bit of main character syndrome. Though perhaps her saying that her character could summon a Fey army was just her playing her character as a liar, and not necessarily trying to be the strongest character. But with all the other things listed, I kind of doubt that. Plus, the strong-arming the newbie Dungeon Master into letting her have things that the DM originally said no to tells me that this player was super pushy and took advantage of the Dungeon Master's inexperience to her advantage, and basically hijacked the plot to revolve around her character. Then, the moment the Dungeon Master gave a little pushback by stating that her character was not smarter than the actual Archfey, she threw a conniption fit. So, I am not surprised that this player was eventually booted for other reasons as well. Now, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, giving the video a like really helps, or so I'm told. But to help entice you to click that button, here is Boris. He may look cute, but trust me, he is nuts. But with that, let's continue to a DnD horror story about a birthday present for a dungeon master that turned out to be anything but. To the post. My Birthday Present by Reddit user Growly4v2. I have been game mastering for a group for 6 years. We recently finished a 1-20 homegrown campaign. That took hours of work every week for me to prep and do for the group, tying their backstories into it, constantly shifting around the world and the planes, more or less, in response to their whims. Look, once they get teleport and plane shift, prep work is basically, you must have something, even an outline for literally every part of your multiverse. I made custom magic items tied to their accomplishments and the goals of each party member. I was constantly told it was the best game they'd ever played in. It felt good. We are taking a very short break while I prepare for the next campaign, which this time is going to be a module, because as much fun as I had with that, It was exhausting. During this break, a player approached me with an idea. They wanted to run a one-shot for the group as a birthday present to me, so I would get to play. I had never said that I disliked being a dungeon master. Hell, I didn't even make any forever DM jokes. It honestly didn't occur to me because I was playing everyone else. I was the villains, the NPCs, all of it, so there wasn't any player envy. But still, I went with it because I liked the group and it felt fun for everyone. So, last Saturday, on my birthday, we all gathered to play, since that is our usual time. I am excited to try this side of the screen for the first time in years. Everyone else is hopping about new abilities and such that they have. We start, and after about a 2-minute world building blurb, we were dropped directly into combat with the big villain of the one-shot. There aren't even character introductions. Sure, we talked about them before, but nothing else. First action is everyone had to make a save, at disadvantage. I fail, and from what failed in past, the only way I would have passed is with a natural 20. Again, I rolled with disadvantage, so I get stun locked. For the entire 4.5 hour session, that was the only time I got to touch my dice. There were no repeats of the save, nothing like that. The other friend who failed got revived by the only greater healer restoration slot the party had, and got to play after a turn. Though me, 4.5 hours of watching everyone else play. Then, when the villain died at the end, I was insta-killed because I was still locked to them in some way by whatever the ability used to stun me was. Then, at the end, I was dead. Nobody restored or revived my character because, why would they? They'd never spoken to him or even saw him do anything. He just stood there, frozen during the battle, and then quietly keeled over dead. So, that was my birthday present from a group that I've devoted hours and years working and customizing for them. I don't really know how to handle this. Was it just bad luck and poor ability design by someone who says that they just grabbed the cool stat block online? Was it targeted in some way because I upset them, or something like that? Edit. Since I'm seeing a lot of "why didn't you freak out" or "leave" comments, that's easy to do from a screen in the abstract. Though, when it's 5 of your closest friends, all clearly having a blast, it is really hard to stand up and scream, "I'm not having fun, so this is over." Wow, what a birthday gift. A game that you can't do anything in and just have to watch everyone else have all the fun. Seriously, what was this dungeon master thinking? I mean, even as a first-time dungeon master, he designed this game as a birthday gift to OP. And anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together would know that what happened to OP's character was BS. I mean, not even any saves at the end of the next combat round? Or heck, even fudging some dice. If I were OP, I would have still said something after a few turns like, "So, when can I actually play?" But now that it's all said and done, I would still say something to the dungeon master of this one-shot, and tell them how you feel about what happened. I mean, harboring all that ill will is not good, and communicating that this made you upset is the way to go in my book. Otherwise, you'll be wondering forever if this was done on purpose or not, which I would wonder as well, because, damn. But with that, let's continue to another DnD horror story about a dungeon master that wants to kill his party, and will use a DMPC to do so. To the post. Dungeon Master accuses me of metagaming because I use damage types the enemies are weak to. By Reddit user RecentAd1598. Been playing with this group for a short while, and it's been alright. Some internal conflicts, some people not getting along and such, but it has been okay. Last night, The group was about to fight a mad scientist and his robot, warforged clockwork guards. Keep in mind, these are homebrew made by the Dungeon Master, meaning I know nothing about their stats, and I could not have looked them up, even if I wanted to. I assumed robots would be weak to electricity, meaning lightning damage, right? So I cast Chromatic Orb with lightning damage, lightning bolt, etc., and the guards die easily. The Dungeon Master then stops the game right there and says, "If you're just going to metagame like that, you can leave." I was, of course, unsure what he meant, so I asked him to elaborate. He said that, "If you're just going to use damage types to your advantage like that, it takes the fun out of combat. You did this exact same thing with radiant damage last game in the crypt when fighting the undead too. I'm sick of it, and everyone else is too." I say that it's only logical to use certain damage types against certain enemies, like how I would use fire against ice enemies and so on. I also asked the others if it was true that everyone else was sick of it too, and people kind of mumbled as an answer, and I could not really hear them. The Dungeon Master said that he would give me one last chance, and next time you metagame like that, I will kick you instantly. I agreed, but I am now kind of unsure if I want to continue playing in that group. Edit. People are asking, so I will fill in. This is a sort of D&D, but it's our own post-apocalyptic world. The lore, in short, is that some phenomenon caused the world of D&D to crash into ours. Things like electricity-powered things are uncommon, but not rare. So my character, and like everyone else would know, that electricity fries electric-powered things. Well, to me, it sounds like this Dungeon Master had that old DM versus player mentality when it came to playing Dungeons & Dragons. And when OP was actually rolling well for a diplomatic solution, he just decided to have his DMPC engage in combat because that is what he planned. It sounds like the rest of the players learned their lesson from this session, but OP, not so much. So I'm sure we might hear another story about this Dungeon Master at some point. But before we move on, real quick, I have to give a big thanks to Jay, who donated $100 via Ko-Fi and said, "I'd love it if you would tell my wife Kay that she's cute. Give the kitties some noggin scritches from us, and thanks for curating and reading such entertaining stories. And as far as the kitties go, they will get some extra pets tonight. And, hey, Kay, you know, you're pretty cute, and many a man are jealous of Jay." So thank you again, Jay. And if you would like to help out the channel like Jay did, the links are down in the description. But it looks like we have time for one more DnD horror story about a Dungeon Master that flips his lid due to a player using damage types to their advantage. To the post. The controlling Dungeon Master who wiped his entire party because he hated that we were not fighting. By Reddit user, WonderfulPen8495. This happened years ago. A group of friends and I were playing with a young Dungeon Master who wanted to dictate exactly how each session went. He was also fond of trying to kill us all by stacking one difficult encounter right after another. So by the second encounter, we'd be out of potions, spells, and so on, and we'd be low on hit points. And he hated magic-based characters, so he declared before each campaign that the campaign was low magic, which tended to make it hard for those of us who liked playing magic-based characters, such as the clerics among us. One campaign, he added an NPC warrior to our party, making the party a total of 6, and we were okay with that, though we shouldn't have been. During one session, our party encountered a troll with a huge club. The way the Dungeon Master so lovingly described the troll, and especially the club, in minute detail, emphasizing on how impressively large and threatening the club was, should have been a clue to the Dungeon Master's intentions. The troll was initially aggressive, but my character had high charisma, and I was getting some decent dice rolls, so I was successfully talking the troll out of attacking us. But this did not suit our dungeon master. When it was clear that we weren't going to have a fight, because I was very persuasive, the dungeon master had his NPC warrior say, "Fudge this," and attack the troll. The warrior got two-shotted, and the rest of the party waded into the fight since the troll was now angry and attacking us. The troll one-shotted the rest of us. Dice rolls were high for the troll and abysmal for the players. We were all deeply angry at the total party wipe, and asked the DM, WTF. The dungeon master confessed that he'd deliberately made the troll and the club overpowered. It was a +3, because he wanted to see how well our party would do in that fight. And that's why he had his NPC attack the troll, because it was clear that he wasn't going to get a fight otherwise, given my high charisma and excellent rolls. He also said that he didn't expect the dice rolls to be so high for his troll and so low for the rest of us. We all told him we would never again play with him as a dungeon master, and nobody did except me, the sucker, who made the mistake of falling for his begging and pleading for another chance. Yeah, he never changed and never redeemed himself. Now, I can agree with OP that it would be logical to use those damage types against those types of enemies. Yet, I will say that it is always good to ask the dungeon master something along the lines of, "Hey, would my character know this?" And then the dungeon master would likely have you do a roll. Though, for the dungeon master to get so upset about the assumption without elaborating on it, that was bad form too. The dungeon master's problem with OP using the damage type should have been better communicated, rather than just being like, "Next time you are out," which tells me that the game itself is a hostile environment. Heck, OP even alluded to that in the beginning. So I would say talk to the dungeon master about it more in depth, and if they're still being a dick, then I would leave. At least, that's just my thinking. Though, what do you all think of this one? But with that, that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you who watch and like my videos, and I hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.